Good morning, gearheads. Are you ready for the first leg of the greatest day in racing? Welcome to Speed City F1 on SiriusXM pre-race show for the Formula One Monaco Grand Prix. This is John Massengale. I'm here in the studio in Austin, Texas, and I am joined by one of the most recognizable voices of two and four-wheel motorsports, former ESPN pit lane reporter Jonathan Green. Good morning, Jonathan. Are you ready to kick off this greatest of
How are you,
days?
boys and girls? Looking forward to it.
Well, out there, grab a cup of coffee and get excited. We have a Ferrari on pole, a McLaren on the front row, and Max Verstappen trying to fight his way to the front from all the way back in sixth with a car he is not happy with us. And also joining us right at the top of the show with his roving microphone, his inexhaustible knowledge, sharp elbows from Monaco where the yachts are big and the people are beautiful, is Chris Medland. Good afternoon to you, Chris. How are you?
Good afternoon, team. I'm pretty good. Thank you very much. I mean, what more can you want? The sun's out. I'm currently stood between the pit lane and Rasgas corner, just waiting for some F1 cars to be let loose around these streets. I mean, doesn't get much better than that, really.
Well,
that's a pretty good start to your day.
Yeah. I got to ask you, Chris, how's the weather looking out there? I was looking on TV and I see some clouds.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine, to be honest. It's going to be similar to what we had during qualifying. So there's a few clouds that always seem to gather on the rocks that are up above Monaco, but they don't tend to actually form down here. So that's why it's quite often in sunshine. And there's no real forecast of rain. There'd been a threat yesterday, earlier in the week, and it seemed to dissipate. And now it looks like tomorrow might be wet around here. For anyone who is on a late flight and was hoping to catch a bit of sunshine, they're not going to be blessed with that. But today should be absolutely fine. So if you're Charles Leclerc, that's probably music to his ears, because he wants as little going wrong as possible today.
Yeah, as little distraction as possible for the man on pole who really wants to take this win home. And we got to give it a shout out because he is the hometown favorite here because he was born in Monaco. And Jonathan, this has got to be a super special, weekend, and it's already been that way for him.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, here is a true monogas. I mean, you got to go back to Anthony Noge's days, and I'm being facetious because there's been very few monogas drivers that have made it all the way there, and Charles Leclerc has, done it. He doesn't come from a Monaco family. He comes from a monegasque family. So he comes from humble beginnings. He is a true civilian of the town rather than somebody who's moved there for tax reasons. Now he deserves those tax reasons, but no, he's a proper monegasque. And they love him. I was doing the historic Monaco Grand Prix a couple of years ago, and he was obviously the guest of honor, and he drove one of Niki Lauda's cars and sadly threw it in the wall at Raskas. But that was because of a mechanical issue. But he was just so, they so wanted him to put on a show. And he's the hometown favorite. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and it is, you have to go all the way back to Louis Chiron. To what year? 1931, I believe. And, that name, if it sounds familiar, he was racing a Bugatti when he won as a Monegasque back in 1931, which is, if you recognize that name and Bugatti together, that's the Bugatti Chiron, the famous, incredible sports car. So there's so much history in Monaco. And, Chris, I'm so jealous that you're standing amongst all of that. I mean, do you get the right reverence for the moment that you're there right now?
Oh, absolutely. I was actually writing a column that I filed post-race a little bit ago because there was a segment of it that I could file long before that, and it is just about how special this place is. Let's be honest, we're likely to get a very processional race today. There's likely to be very little overtaking. What happens at the start will be exciting, and then after that, it's whether someone has a problem or whether there's a pit stop error or there's a badly timed safety car, something like that. There's definitely variables, but it's likely to be pretty processional. But being here is when you really do get, and I'm sorry telling everyone who's not here about this, but that's when you really get a sense of what this place is all about. To see these drivers with their immense skill threading these cars around these streets, it is incredible. It is genuinely, absolutely incredible. Every time I come, it doesn't get old to see it. To be able to get as close to the cars as you can, trackside. So for fans in the grandstands as well, we had Bob on the show yesterday. Obviously, he gets that same feeling that they're probably the closest grandstands to racetrack you can get. you're right on top of it. And it gives you that real appreciation for what the drivers are doing. And every lap is just an event and brilliant to watch, even if actually in terms of racing action, not a huge amount has happened.
Yeah, it's so true, Chris. And you know what? We've got a clip from post-qualifying.
Hang on a sec there, John, because I'm going to be cheeky maybe and just say quickly, if Lando Norris, as we walk down the pit lane, Lando, it hasn't actually, so can I speak to you?
You can talk to me.
Starting fourth, how are you going to finish on the podium?
Great one. I mean, around here it's always tough, but strategy, maybe a good start. That always helps, but strategy is probably our best chance to do something. So we'll see. I think we'll have good pace. But we need to stay with the Ferraris, and that's going to be a challenge. But I'm excited. It's always a good one around here.
Enjoy it. Thank you, mate.
There you go, Chris.
Good work.
Start off the top of the show with a grab from Lando. Where were you guys walking just then?
Straight down the middle of the pit lane. And the reason he's joking, I don't know if you could hear it on the mic, he first said, has this been allowed, has it? Would be whether it's been set up with the team, because there's no team members around him. So he knows that they're not recording what is being said, and they like to know what's said. But I was then smart. I let that interview end slightly earlier than the McLaren garage, because another TV crew wanted to do what I was doing, and then McLaren won't have seen me. So they're not going to know I did it. I know I've just told you all that, but yeah, so I'm sure it was fine. So sorry to cut you off there, John, but I thought we'd get one of the top four.
No, absolutely. I was just about to play a clip from the man on pole, because he does talk about, a little bit about what we've touched on. So let's hear from Charles Leclerc right after qualifying yesterday.
Yeah, the feeling and the confidence were high since the first laps in FP1. But that also adds up to the tension, I will say, because you do FP1 and you are very fast. You do FP2, everybody looks at you because you are the fastest. FP3, you are the fastest again by a bit of a margin as well, especially in the first part of FP3. So everybody is pointing the finger, and you can feel that as a driver. But it's the excitement that I like. And coming into the qualifying, it wasn't easy because we had a very late engine change at the last minute, which add to the tension of already a Monaco qualifying and a tense quali in general. But we did it well, and obviously we did what was targeted, which is to start on pole position. Now my whole focus and attention is on the process and on the preparation that we've got to do in order to be as ready as possible for tomorrow's race. We won't be focusing on the finality that we all want, which is to win, but more on the process to get there. And I hope that tomorrow is the right one for us.
Do you think you can do it with the car that you've got? The speed of the car, can you kind of go and deliver that result tomorrow?
I think the car has been there. Tyre management has been a big thing here, especially for the laps around the pit stops. So it's going to be important to be on it at this time of the race. If we do so, then it's looking good.
Yeah, Jonathan, he's looked so fast all weekend, starting from the moment FP1. But he was talking about the tension of qualifying. Let's face it, qualifying in Monaco is really kind of the star of the show, isn't it?
Yeah, no question. And even going into this weekend, they were saying that Charles Leclerc should be favourite, and felt like the Ferrari was going to perform here, and it has. It's done exactly what they said it would do, and you really do feel that it's the old cliche that all journalists rock out, but it's his to lose. And what I mean by that is, he's got the advantage. If you've got pole, you just need to do your job well, which is get a good start, get into Sandevot. And if you can do that, you should be able to drive strategically, which he's always been able to do well. And he knows it like everybody else knows it like the back of their hand. But the point is, if you lead the Grand Prix, and I was listening to Jenson Button over the weekend, your tire deg does not happen because you're not chasing it. You're not behind anybody else's heat or wash. And so the advantage of pole is not just clean air, it's also the fact that your tires aren't going to go off, so you're going to be in so much better shape than everybody else.
And Chris, it's not always gone well for Charles Leclerc with pole here in Monaco, has it?
Not at all. So I have a quite interesting stat about this, actually. So I think, everyone's mentioned he's taken pole position twice. Today will be the first time, assuming all goes well between now and the race start, that Charles Leclerc starts from pole position. Now, everyone remembers that he had the crash in 2021 at the end of qualifying, and it meant that when they tried to do the laps to the grid ahead of the race, I think it was a drive shaft issue that came up. They were checking the gearbox for damage, and the drive shaft problem that meant he couldn't take the start. In 2022, he was on pole, and then we had that huge downpour before the race started. They suspended the whole process and eventually set them off on a rolling start about an hour and a bit later. So he didn't have that pressure of getting the launcher off the line and looking down to turn one. And it's a short run, but it's still a run you've got to handle. So this will actually be the first time he sits on pole position and the lights go out as it stands here in Monaco, which is remarkable given how close he's been. But I thought that was really impressive that he talked about the process and talked about not the finality of the outcome, because we've seen, I mean, I can tell people about today in Formula 2, you can get so lucky to win a race. Zach O'Sullivan won the feature race, starting 15th in the Formula 2 race. There was no rain and there was one virtual safety car, but that virtual safety car came on lap 40 out of 42, and he hadn't made a pit stop yet. He got to the lead. He was just running around. The way we put it in British English is goal hanging a little bit. His pace was good. He was probably going to finish about 6th or 7th with his pit stop. But then as he came in the pit lane, virtual safety car was needed for another car that had actually just made the pit stop and then had an incident as it came out the pits. And it meant he got free stop and came out in the lead and won the race. The guy that finished second, Isaac Hadjar, who's a Red Bull young driver, was raging. He calmed down quickly afterwards because his own race had gone quite well until that point. But talk about how cards can fall for you. We make puns about the casino here. That was certainly one in that sense. And I think we just got to remember that with Leclerc, that there's a chance that they can do everything right today, Ferrari, and Leclerc can do everything right and still not win the race, because there are ways that luck can play a big part.
John, talking of Hadjar, he did take the ultimate gamble. He almost, his reactions were just sublime yesterday in the sprint race. He came through the tunnel and Miata was blind, was stalled or stalling, and his reactions were brilliant. And he saved his own bacon by just razor quick reactions to get away from him coming around the corner in the tunnel. I want to give a shout out to Juan Manuel Correa getting his best result of fifth in F2, ahead of all people like Antonelli. So it's good to see the Americans up there.
Yeah, and man, I did see that almost the reaction time was just stunning that he didn't run into the back of the car in front of him. There was a little of both errors on that. Really, he shouldn't have gone into that tunnel because it looked like he had a little bit of preview maybe. But anyway, that was crazy. But Chris, what you just described is what we've seen so many times in the last few years of Formula One. You gamble for waiting for a safety car, but it rarely happens, and that happened in Formula 2. But look, let's we got a couple more clips I want to play here because we have an interesting take from Oscar Piastri. It kind of piggybacks on the back of what Lando was saying. And let's hear from the driver in second position in the McLaren, Oscar Piastri.
Very happy, yep. I think Q3, there's always the little bits here and there that you think you can improve, especially around here. Normally when you say that around here, that's when you end up in a wall. So, no, very happy with it. I think, Charles looked very strong all weekend, and to get so close, I think is a good effort. Feel like I executed the session pretty well. A little tap of the wall in Q2 didn't do anyone any favors, but in the end it didn't matter. So yeah, very happy with it, and I think overall just a very good weekend up until this point.
It feels like you're super connected with the car, that you've got a ton of confidence. I know overtaking's hard around here, but you've only got to pass one car for the win tomorrow. How are you feeling about that?
I've only got to overtake one, but it's still so hard. I'll try my best. Of course, the run to turn one's very short. It's impossible to overtake, but there is strategy left. So we'll see. We're definitely with the shout. We're starting in the second best spot to try and win the race. So we've got some options, but we need to be switched on and ready to make sure we capitalize if there's any opportunities.
Oscar has looked so quick at times, and funny, particularly in qualifying. Am I dreaming that, Jonathan?
No, I actually think he's on. I mean, obviously both McLarens are having a good season, but Oscar particularly, I think, is, we expect it from Lando, but Piastri is still in formation, as they say, or still forming his brilliance. But I think we're seeing it. And I really do think, I know we're expecting processional, as Chris says, but I just got a quiet hope that McLarens can shake this up. And with the impetus that they've got from that win at Miami, I really do think that this is a great opportunity for Oscar and Lando to a certain extent, because you never know. Tactics and strategy could be a big part of what McLaren are doing compared to Red Bull and to Ferrari.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue to build the excitement for not only Monaco, but this amazing day of racing. You're listening to Speed City F1, back after these messages. All right, let's see what the boys and girls are saying out on YouTube this morning. TW's first in. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. It's race day. Mike Bowles says, hey, SCB. Ray is streaming from Charlotte. Andy P says, I know the first leg will kick off on schedule. Not sure about that second one. Yeah, I have the rain forecast in my show notes today for the Indy 500. TW's asking about the weather. David Lawrence, good morning. All the greatest days in racing this year of the year. What else? David Lawrence says, I'm torn. This is going to be a good one unless something goes crazy and off the rails. We'll see either Ferrari or McLaren win today. Yes. Kevin Kelly, yep, the brakes went out on Nicky's Ferrari. Yep. And Chris Medland, David Lawrence says, Chris Medland, you bulldog. Yeah, I guess right after you got Lando. And Jonathan, Andy P loves your shirt. I like it too, actually. And Andy P makes a good point. Ferraris have not had the best launches off the line in the last couple of races. Gives him hope, Mr. McLaren man there. Just checking the TV screens. I don't see you, Chris. They're walking down pit lane there.
Yeah, so I'm now on the grid trying to just see how our signal holds up down here. And for now, we're holding up. I think it's weaker, but holding up. But the more people that come on here is when it starts to struggle.
Well, it sounds good so far. So we shall see. Yeah, Bob was in the stands yesterday.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get Ao Komatsu to talk about the Haas disqualifications.
Yeah, that's a shame.
But he's not on the grid yet, so I'll have to go back to find him when he gets on the grid.
All right, here we go.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
A word from our sponsor, CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike presents Driven N60 as the official cybersecurity partner of the Mercedes, AMG, Petronas Formula One team. CrowdStrike protects against cyber threats so the team can focus on what matters, their next win. The revolutionary cloud-native unified CrowdStrike Falcon platform harnesses the speed and power of the cloud to protect and defend organizations of all sizes against increasingly complex threats, stopping breaches before they happen. Because on and off the track, the stakes couldn't be higher. A split second can make the difference between victory and defeat. When every second counts, protection shouldn't slow you down. It should fuel your momentum. CrowdStrike, protection at every turn. To learn more and to try CrowdStrike Falcon free today, visit crowdstrike.com/XM. And best of luck to George Kurtz. He's been on a nice run this year and had a good run here at COTA here in Austin at the races here. The CEO of CrowdStrike is a big-time great race driver, so good luck to him. All right, boys. Jonathan Green, I'm getting excited. I'm looking at the clock. We're 40 minutes from the start of the Monaco Grand Prix. How about yourself?
Yeah, and just to follow on what Chris was saying, that the other thing about Monaco that you never really anticipate, you see so many of the pictures, and you see the boats in the harbor and all the rest of it. And when you get there, that is all exactly as you see it on TV. Pool, the stands, the whatever. But you cannot, I cannot emphasize that when that first practice happens or when the race starts, it doesn't matter whether you're glued to the fence where Chris is right now, or you're in a hotel somewhere. The cacophony of noise just bounces off the buildings because it's in an amphitheater. And so you've got all these large buildings, and it doesn't matter where you are in Monaco, you are absolutely enveloped with the sound of Formula One. And it really does take your breath away for the entire weekend you're there. And I just want to set that up for people. It's just incredible. It's all encompassing.
There's times that I wish my microphone wasn't quite as good as it is, because that is exactly what is happening right now. The pit lane's just opened, and we've got the whole grid heading out to turn one. And what was quite quiet and serene here on the grid, you can hear music and things. I can barely hear myself talking right now. So hopefully you can still hear me through the mic, because it's normally pretty strong. But the cars are probably about 20 feet from me, the other side of the fence, and a very temporary stage, all rolling out. It's the tightest pit lane of the year. It's remarkable what they cram in here too, but that only adds to that noise and that atmosphere, because the sound's got nowhere to go. It bounces off the buildings and the walls and the grandstands, and it's kind of maintained here. So yeah, we've really got that. It's like someone just switched the race on this second. They've gone, right, start those engines, send them out, and the whole vibe of the city has changed.
Yeah, Chris, it was perfect timing. As Jonathan was talking about, your mic started lighting up and we could hear it a little bit. But yes, we can hear you just fine. And that's great to set the stage for us, because it is such a cool event. And it's funny, this is a race that I've been to myself. And you're right, Jonathan. It is so special. It was a long time ago when I was there. And it's funny. People talk about it, how it's still very similar. Jonathan, when is the last time you've been? A few years, right?
Yeah, no, the last few times I've been have been the Monaco Historic, which is actually a really pleasant event, because you don't have the craziness of everybody being there, and you get a good crowd, but you don't get it packed out. And you do get some fantastic racing, and you're very accessible. So I've enjoyed it then. But no, the last time probably I did F2 there, which was interesting, because the press room for F2 is right on the exit of the pool. So you know how people bounce over that curb where Mick Schumacher crashed and then bounce onto the wall? We've seen it a few times. Well, the press room for F2 is right underneath there. So they literally crash into you.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, one thing we do want to talk about is we did have some news after qualifying yesterday, because the Haas F1 team actually had a technical error, and they got excluded. Their qualifying was excluded from Monaco qualifying because of a DRS issue. And I'm actually reading Chris's article on Racer.com to make sure I get this right, but it looks like the FIA delegate Joe Bauer's findings read that the uppermost rear wing element adjustable positions were checked on the cars, and the left-hand side and the right-hand side outermost of each of the elements were exceeding the maximum allowed 85 millimeters on both cars. And that's obviously not in compliance. And so they had those qualifying sessions disqualified, starting at the back of the grid. Am I correct on that, Chris?
You are indeed. And I'm actually walking as quickly as I can, because everyone's going in the other direction, but I'm heading to the back of the grid to try and see if Max is there right now to give us a full explanation of why it happened. I've had it in spoken form already, but not recorded. So I'd love to get him to explain it to everybody. But yeah, allowed to start, but from the back of the grid.
Yeah.
So they were obviously quick enough in practice, and you don't have to pass scrutineering for practice, because it's not a competitive session. So therefore, they've been allowed to line up the back of the grid.
Well, we do have we'd have a clip from Kevin Magnussen, and I'm going to get Casey to get that one queued up for us while Chris is getting set up. It's a short clip. I think it's only about 30 or 40 seconds, Chris, so in case you get AO. But he at the time, he does not know about the penalty, but he does talk about his continued disappointment with this season. Let's hear from Kevin Magnussen.
We didn't manage to get a clean lap on the second set again, so it's the fifth or sixth times this year, so not great. I'm getting pretty annoyed with this, but the pace was there in the car. I think we could have been fighting for Q3, and Q3 around here you score points in the race, so pretty gutted again. We fueled the car with an extra lap in case the first push would have gotten traffic, so we could abort that and go again. We went out with time to do that, and I started the push lap, and I gained more than a tenth in the first corner, and we abort the lap for no reason. And next lap there was traffic the whole lap. So,
Chris, just checking in before we move on to anything else.
Well, no, at the moment, Max is not on the grid yet. Actually, a lot of the mechanics are just walking onto the grid now as the first cars arrive. But what's interesting by that comment from Magnussen, he obviously at that stage won't have spoken to the team. But as he said, he had traffic on the second lap. They may well have foreseen a lot of traffic ahead. So they're protecting the best of the tyres by going, okay, like you might end up with a good first half of this lap, but then you're going to hit traffic. It's better off that we save them. So for the drivers, it's normally a bigger picture that they are unaware about at that point when they speak to us straight after a session. But in a sense, maybe it's a good thing that they didn't qualify so well, because that would have been even more painful if he'd have stuck in the top 10 and then lost that grid position with this penalty.
Yeah. And speaking of Max, you mentioned Max, and we haven't talked about Max Verstappen a lot because he's starting in 6th position, his worst spot of the whole year. And here's a clip from Max talking about his entire weekend, how he struggled. Here from Max.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was positively surprised all the way till Q3 that we were actually looking like we're in the mix. I mean, it was a big surprise to me, but yeah, it's just like driving on a nice edge. Every curve, I can't drive on the curb, to be honest. That's why we are losing so much time in Sector 2. I have to drive around everything while everyone else is just plowing over it. Yeah, it's costing a lot of lap time. The car is like a go-kart over the curbs and the bumps, so it's just incredibly difficult. If you turn in 1 centimeter too late, you might bounce half a meter more to the left or the right. And that makes it just very unpredictable. We were very good in the medium to high speed, where you don't have the bumps so much. So that's why I felt really comfortable, and it was actually a lot of fun to drive. But yeah, we lost too much in all the low speed.
How difficult do you think tomorrow is going to be? Because you've got to be fighting that car for 78 odd laps around here, and concentration is key, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not going to be enjoyable. I mean, every lap that I did so far, in the low speed is a challenge, to be consistent. Of course, in the race, you don't, push it to the limit. Everyone is saving and just making sure that you have the tires to go with it. So we'll all calm down a little bit, but we don't have the fastest car anyway. So all the cars that are ahead of us are anyway faster. So just try to follow. And I mean, it's Monaco, things can happen, but I also don't expect miracles.
Yeah. When's the last time you heard a conversation like that with Max Verstappen, Jonathan? I think you're on mute, Greenie.
Sorry about that. Yes, he needs a bit of a miracle. He needs to get to Saint Devote, make a quick prayer to the saint that is Devote, and and see if he can get one. But yeah, it's rare to hear him. I hate to say it, and I'm not sort of. I'm a big Max fan, and like we said last week, it's not that we don't want Red Bull to keep achieving, but it is nice to see him on the back foot and the team on the back foot, and it is good to see, like I said last week, 6 cars genuinely fighting. And now Mercedes up there as well. And I say those 6 cars, the 2 Ferraris, the 2 Red Bulls, obviously the 2 McLarens, and now the 2 Mercedes. We've lost Perez, and that is a bad scene for him. He's had a terrible weekend. If you think Max is not on the back foot, look at Perez.
Yeah, it's really true.
That's a really good point, actually, Jonathan, to jump in on that. Perez is not yet on the grid, but I'm stood near his grid stop, which is a long way back. He'll start 16th. He originally qualified 18th before the Haas disqualifications. But one thing that Max said that was really telling yesterday was he said, I can't be disappointed with 6th when Checo is in 18th, because he's normally really good on street circuits. He comes alive here. So I think that shows you how hard it is and how big the struggles are. And based on that, I can't be disappointed with where I've ended up. But he was then very good at explaining the limitations they've had. And what he did also say is this is a problem Red Bull have had since 2022. So since this generation of car, they've always had this problem, but they have had a big enough car advantage that they've been able to kind of hide it or mask it, or it's just ensured that they're not in too much trouble. And everyone will remember last year when Alonso nearly took pole, it was the final sector where Verstappen turned it round. He was a long way down after the middle sector. That still tallies. The middle sector was the weakness. The final sector, he could actually gain it back. But he says now everyone's catching up, so we don't have that buffer, and this is the reality. So this year's car was actually meant to address this weakness, and he says, well, it hasn't. It was meant to, but it hasn't.
And what is the weakness? I mean, can you define it? In is it? I mean,
in a very basic terms, it's that the car is overly stiff to create a really good aero platform. So these flaws are massively influential in creating downforce. So if you can guarantee that your car is at the right angle to the track surface at all times, or as long as possible, then you get consistent, good downforce from that floor. If your car, say you have a soft setup and it's moving around a bit and the ride height's changing quite a lot, then the amount of downforce you're getting from the car and the performance from the floor will be changing every time the ride height changes. Now, Red Bull seem to have a car that works brilliantly on normal racetracks, but as soon as you got something like this, where there's a lot of curves, there's crowns in the road and bumps, even just on the streets, then what it does, it kind of like breaks the seal between the floor and the track surface that's creating downforce, and suddenly you've got no performance for a split second. And that is obviously very unnerving for a driver. That creates these snaps, and then it comes back when the car settles again. But we were very impressed, actually, how in Imola, the cars seemed to settle very quickly going over the curbs there. Well, that was because the way they set it up, that was the way it could be quickest. And yet they still were very, very pressured by McLaren and Ferrari. So it's just an inherent trait of how they focus so much on getting performance from their floor, but it needs a stable platform. And the second you don't have that on a street circuit like this or another track where you have to attack the curbs, you lose the ability to use that performance.
Yeah, this is, that's a great explanation, Chris. Thank you. All right, let's get a quick break in. When we come back, we'll be 30 minutes from the start of the Monaco Grand Prix. Back after these messages. All right, we're still live on YouTube. Let me look at some of the stories and some of the interviews we got left. Greeny, anything you got that you want to get in?
No, I put in that Haas story. I mean, there's always the perennial debate about how to make Monaco more modern to fit with, everybody's saying that the cars have surpassed, the track now and they've got to do something. But what?
Well, one thing they're going to do is make the car smaller, too.
Well, or divide qualifying into two groups. So that's the first thing I would do. And also maybe, as Hamilton suggested, do a different set of tires that make the strategy forcible, if you will.
Yeah, what were you going to say, Chris?
Go with the softest tire, so you have to make two pit spots, for example.
I was just going to say that I kind of this week I felt it hasn't outgrown it at all. Like, it could be better, and you're right, smaller cars are the way to go. Because it just opens up a slight potential for a move. We saw it in the junior categories, the odd move. But
do we see more car overtaking in F2 and F3? Not really.
Yeah, no, we did, though. I say yes, actually.
Okay.
Certainly a lot closer following. But in F2, I reckon, we're not talking a lot, but in a 42-lap race where there's only two strategies you can do. You only have one pit stop. I reckon there's probably 6 or 7 overtakes. And those are exciting because you don't normally get them. And you see it build for a number of laps. I mean, Antonelli passed Colapinto after following him for like 30 laps, but when he got through, it was a big deal. It's just different. And we have enough races now that in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, it'll be a very different race again in Canada.
Yeah.
I am stalking Komatsu, but I can't find him. I'm still down at Haas. No sign of him so far.
All right, here we go.
Hello to everyone, this is Gunther Steiner, this is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
The Speed City F1 pre-race show on SiriusXM is brought to you by CrowdStrike. Stop today's most sophisticated cyber attacks at the office, the racetrack, and everywhere in between. Learn more at crowdstrike.com/XM. Thanks to Gunther Steiner for bringing us back. Chris, have you seen Gunther and Monaco yet?
I have not, actually. I must admit, I've seen Eric Boulier, the former McLaren team principal. He's here with French television, Canal Plus. But no sign of Gunther, who I saw was taking the Michael somewhat with his Instagram post overnight when the two Haas cars got disqualified. I think he put up a picture of a tape measure with no caption, or just said, "Does anyone need to borrow this?" So poking fun at his former team. But I'm still hoping to find out Komatsu just to get an explanation on what happened there. And he's still yet to come on the grid. Maybe he has a lot of guests to worry about. Potentially they've had an issue. Or because they're starting at the back, maybe he's stayed in the garage to try and prepare from there. But I may well jump in suddenly, completely off topic, I'm afraid, everyone, if I do see Komatsu.
Well, I know one way we can try to stir that up, Chris, is as everybody can hear, Bob Varsha is not with us today. He's actually in Monaco doing a little work there, and he can't join us. He did join yesterday for a few minutes from the grandstands, but normally Bob does the grid for us in this segment, and so I'm going to do just a mini version of that to not to try to emulate the great Bob Varsha, but just to get us through the grid. And Chris, if you obviously if you need to jump in, please do that. But let's run down the grid here so everybody knows what's happening, because we do have some change since qualifying yesterday with the Haas cars. But starting on the front at pole, Charles Leclerc, the Monegasque, the hometown favorite. Hopefully he will seal the deal this time and win this race. But right behind him, Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. Behind him is Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari. And then the other McLaren, Lando Norris, who we heard from live here a few minutes ago. And right behind him in the Mercedes, George Russell, and starting fifth. And then right behind him in his worst position of the entire year, Max Verstappen, starting in sixth in the Red Bull, as Chris talked about, with a car that's been not great for Max all weekend, been complaining. And behind him in the other Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton. And they have looked good. In fact, I'm kind of surprised that they weren't even a little more competitive, although the times were still very close as they've been all year. And behind Lewis Hamilton is Yuki Tsunoda in the RB and up in eighth. That's a great performance by Yuki, well ahead of his teammate, as you'll hear. And then in ninth, Alexander Albon in the Williams. Another nice performance to put himself up into the top 10 in the Williams. And behind Albon is Pierre Gasly in the Alpine. Another good performance. And behind him, his teammate, Esteban Ocon. And down in 12th, Daniel Ricciardo in the other RB. Behind him, Lance Stroll in the first Aston Martin, finishing in qualifying ahead of his teammate. Right behind him, Fernando Alonso. And we have a clip from Fernando. We'll play that because he was complaining about traffic, which, as we know, that happens in Monaco, especially during qualifying. And behind Alonso, starting in 15th, is Logan Sargent and the other Williams. And down in 16th is the other Red Bull of Sergio Perez. Somebody commented in our social media a while ago, they thought that was probably the most disappointing of the entire qualifying. Hard to argue with that in that particular car. And in 17th, Valtteri Bottas in the Kick Sauber Ferrari-powered car, and followed by his teammate, Zhou Guanyu, in 18th in the other Sauber car. And, of course, at the back of the grid, the two Haas cars, Nico Hulkenberg in 19th and Kevin Magnussen in 20th, because of the DRS technical infraction. After they installed the new DRS wings, they had some troubles. But, Chris, my hopes did not come true. You did not get to interrupt me with the interview, but I do hear your microphone lighting up out there. What's happening?
Yeah, I only did, Bob. I'm actually, it's very hard to make progress along this grid because it's so small and narrow, and it's so busy. So many people will then emerge onto the grid at the same time, and you are, it's like trying to queue for the subway at rush hour, and you're just shuffling along, trying to get further down the grid to see who else is here. So I've made, in a sense, the mistake of making my way up to 9th place so far by Alex Albon's car. We spoke to Albon on yesterday's post-qualifying show. He's looking to hold on for a few points there. And now I'm actually behind Lewis Hamilton's car that you mentioned. And I did want to bring this up. I nearly interrupted you with this. But Hamilton mentioned after qualifying that he doesn't have a new specification of front wing that George Russell has.
Yeah.
And that he believes it's worth 0.2 of a second. And he knew automatically he'd be 0.2 of a second off his teammate as a result. And therefore, he said that he doesn't see himself out-qualifying Russell this season very often because of the difference in car specs. Now, the suggestion there being, well, Russell's the one staying, so the development work's going to go towards him, and he has to continue in that direction with Mercedes, while Hamilton obviously will be phased out before going to Ferrari. But kind of the way he said it was also a little bit, it came out of the blue. No one at Mercedes had suggested that was going to be the case. And it just seemed like a bit of a dig. So who knows quite how true it is in terms of the actual gap between the two cars. But yeah, Lewis was not happy and made sure that people knew it.
I flagged that up. That was one of the last things I put in my notes, where it felt like a dig. I thought it was the same thing. It's like, basically, he's saying, I'm resigned to to not getting the good stuff because I'm moving to Ferrari. It was actually pretty fascinating. But Chris, I'm watching the grid walk from Martin Brundle, so be careful out there because he's almost run into two people.
Sorry to cut you off, but I've got Michael Douglas here in front of me, and I thought I'd ask him a question. You're here with Aston Martin, I see. You rooting for the green cars this weekend?
I am. I'm here with Aston Martin as their guest. Very appreciative. Trying to get here to Monaco almost every year. Special magical place any time of the year, but especially now.
Does it ever get old when you get to come on the grid like this and be this close to these cars?
No, especially when it gets old because we've had like 2 cycles between all the years that Mercedes won and now all the years that Red Bull won. But this year, I'm happy to see, and I think for the fans also, a real mix. You know, we got McLaren and Ferrari up there in the mix, and I would say probably one of those two are going to win.
Yeah, I know you're with Aston Martin, but it would be great to see a different winner this weekend. And what's kind of new with you, dare I say? What's on your agenda when you're not at Grand Prix?
I'm taking a break now. I did this limited series Ben Franklin 2022 came out, but now I'm just taking a little break, enjoying life.
Well, so you should, and it's a beautiful place to enjoy it. So thank you so much for your time.
Nice, Chris. He sounds like he knows his stuff, doesn't he?
He does.
I've seen him here a number of times, but never spoken to him. So I thought it was about time I did.
Yeah, I saw him in Miami. In fact, I almost bumped into him. I even took a quick snap with my phone as I walked away. But yeah, he was in Miami, not this year, but last year. His
wife's a big fan too.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. But he clearly knows his Formula One, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does the Laureus Awards. He's been at Monaco many times, and yeah, he's a big fan of Formula One.
Yep, we are 18 minutes from the start of the Monaco Grand Prix, and there's other good stories. We had Gasly for the first time in Q3, and I didn't mention that when I ran down the grid, but that was good to see. And you know, Jonathan, we do have a clip from Logan Sargent that I want to play. Oh, hey, Chris, they're now showing Michael Douglas is doing an interview for Sky. So you beat Sky to the punch this year. But Casey, I want to cue up this.
Don't tell his wife.
Yeah. I want to play a clip from Logan Sargent and get your take on it, Jonathan, because, I mean, look, we all know that it kind of feels like the inevitable is coming to Logan lose his seat. But let's hear from Logan right now.
To be honest, I feel like I've been driving well all weekend. I feel like it was another good run at it. You know, traffic-free laps, and honestly really happy with the laps I did and the performance I got out of the car. Just unfortunate to be missing a few key components this weekend, which I think ultimately made a bit of a bigger difference than I was expecting. And that would have been the difference of getting through or not. But nonetheless, proud of the way I drove, and I genuinely feel like I got everything out of the package I had.
What were those components that you were missing?
Just on a different rear wing, a different floor, and a slight setup compromise I had to make.
Yeah, he basically sounded like he was blaming his gear a little bit there, didn't it?
Well,
Jonathan?
let's ask about someone else who's had a bit of trouble with their equipment this weekend, and it's Red Bull. So I've got Christian Horner in front of me, and Christian, sorry for that segue, but it was from Logan Sargent struggling at Williams, and it's so unusual to see you back here on the third row. Was it expected that it would be this tough for you this weekend?
Well, look, it was always going to be a tricky weekend, but obviously, we didn't have a great run in Q3 yesterday. I think we could have been on the second or third, but the Ferrari was just too quick. But let's see what we can do in the race.
What does it become now? Because obviously we've been nailing you down as title favourites, and you're going to walk it this season. And the last few races showed maybe that's not the case. Charles could take quite a dent out of Max's lead this weekend, couldn't he?
This race is about damage limitation. Score as many points as we can, and try and limit the damage.
I mean, could Checo do anything from back there as well?
It's limited. I mean, if he can get anywhere near the top 10, that would be a great result for him.
And how should we read this before we go into this race? Is this a sign of how close things are getting, or is this just a bad weekend you're going to want to move on from quickly?
Well, I think it's gonna vary from race to race. I mean, we've had the previous races, we had 8 pole positions. We won 1 week ago, so it doesn't change in 5 days. Let's see. It's horses for courses.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I think a World Cup winner wants to take a photo with you, so I'll leave you to him. Thank you very much. That's Saya Khaleesi. He's just coming over for a photo with the Red Bull, the South Africa Rugby World Cup winning captain.
Yeah, thank you for pronouncing his name, because I saw Brundle interviewing him and I could not pronounce his name. But we got to give it to Christian Horner, at least the respect that he has for you, Chris, because I don't remember a show where he hasn't given us, at least in the pre or post, one of the two, hasn't given us an interview. He must, you obviously get along.
I'd like to think I have the respect of most people on this grid. Actually, I'd like to say all of the drivers and team bosses on this grid, but I will admit, remember that the title sponsor of Red Bull now is Oracle, and Oracle are an American-based company, and we are broadcasting to America. So I don't think it is lost on him, the audience he's talking to when I show up.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get our last break in real quick here, and we'll see who Chris can drag up, and then we'll get you ready, and we'll be inside 15 minutes for the Monaco Grand Prix after this. All right, let's see what the boys and girls are saying out on YouTube. Kevin Kelly said, sadly, Logan is starting to sound like Lance. Okay, Kevin, that's a little extreme, buddy. I mean, Lance's, I don't remember Lance doing an interview that lasted more than about 30 seconds, but I agree with you. The sentiment a little bit there, Kevin, is that I didn't really like where he was going with that, kind of blaming the gear. But it is what it is. We didn't get your take on that, Jonathan. Did you get to hear what Logan was saying?
Yeah, I did. And it's a bit like Hamilton, he's trying to sort of explain to the wider audience why he's where he is. Hamilton did it in a sort of pouty way, but Sargent's saying, look, different floor, different front wing, different rear wing, a bit like Hamilton. They're moving on a Williams because they're trying to develop the car, and they're talking to people like Bottas and all sorts of people, Sainz, you name it. And so, the inevitable is to say, I'm actually pleased with where I am, considering what I'm up against, which is not as good as Albon's car.
Yep. Chris, are you chasing anybody right now?
No, it's national anthem time right now, so you've timed this break perfectly.
Ah, nice. We get lucky with that more often than not, it seems like. Let's see. Anybody else got anything on YouTube? Kevin Kelly, I wonder if Bernie's there. Grizz, have you seen Bernie?
He is not here, no. He's back in Gstaad. I was reliably informed by the Daily Mail of all outlets.
Why is he stuck in Gstaad?
No, well, that's just where he is staying. He's not coming here.
TW says, what odds are the casinos giving for Checky to win? That's actually a pretty good question. We don't talk about betting.
He's 4-1 to win.
All right, here we go. Coming back.
Hello, I'm Jenny Gow from BBC F1. You are listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back to Speed City. John Massengale here in the studio in Austin, joined by Jonathan Green and Chris Medland live in Monaco with his roving microphone. A minute ago, I mentioned that we were going to hear from Fernando Alonso because he has not been looking great lately. And he talks about, in this clip, his troubles in qualifying yesterday.
Yeah, a lot of traffic. I think that was a killer for our qualifying. I think I lost 3 tenths out of 11 with a car just in front, and then another 2 tenths in the last corner. There were 3 cars parked there starting their lap. No one to blame. I think they cannot vanish, in the very last moment. This is Monaco, and the cars are very big. They cannot disappear, but we found ourselves in the wrong place at the wrong time today, and this is very painful here in Monaco.
Yeah, you've obviously done a lot of laps around here in Monaco on a Sunday afternoon. Just how tricky is tomorrow going to be from where you're starting?
Yeah, very tricky. I think it's going to be parade of cars tomorrow, but nothing we can do. You need to do the job on Saturday. We didn't manage today, so we need to do better next time.
Potentially a parade of cars. That is always Monaco on race day, but hey, Chris, I am looking at your article on Formula1.com. Plug. Chris Medland. He does the what to watch for, and a couple things that are on that list is how can Max come back from 6th, but I want to come back to that one because I want to talk about the threat of the safety cars. Speaking of things that happened in Monaco, talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this race, once we get the start out of the way, and that law is done, as Pierre Gasly goes the other way, and he's heading for some points today, hopefully for Alpine after a great qualifying session yesterday. Once it starts out the way, it's all about the pit stop and the pit stop timing. Because if you make it your pit stop at the wrong time, someone could jump you, whether it's that they make it a lap before you or they make it a lap after you. Either way, like the undercut, the overcut, clean air, traffic issues, whatever, that could be a problem. So that's the only time, really, that drivers will be nervous and teams will be nervous when they come into the pits. The rest of the time, when they're circulating, they're pretty calm. But if you haven't made your pit stop yet, for example, if you start on the medium or the hard compound tire and you run as long as possible, and then you get a safety car right at the end of the race, and you can make a pit stop on the safety car and save a load of race time, then you can gain a huge amount of positions. And we might see someone go rogue, maybe like Max. The problem is it can be risky.
We actually lost you on that one, Chris. Jonathan, any takes on Max coming back from 6th?
You know, for all we say that you can't overtake, the strategy involved. You can.
Chris is still going. He doesn't realize we can't hear him. Chris, we've lost you, buddy. Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
No, what I was going to say is, the key to Monaco is to be alert to what might happen. I mean, if you are Max Verstappen, you can almost predict that Piastri will make a lunge at turn 1 because that's his best hope. And that is also the best hope of several drivers trying to make it through. So Verstappen needs to be aware, both behind and in front, that if he's smart and anticipates that potential, and the same at Casino Square, and the same at at Rascasse. These are where you win and lose. Monaco is to be aware, and also if 10 laps into the race something happens and there's a yellow flag, dart into the pits, change the tires, and go long. You've got to. It's really a strategist game if you want to get ahead, and it's possible, but it's being aware.
Yeah, and it's just so true. I was looking at a stat over the last 10 Monaco Grand Prix held going back to 2013. The driver leading up the hill to Montserrat, Mancenet, on the opening lap has been the driver on the top step of the podium later that day. So on 6 occasions. So that is just the way Monaco can be. But you mentioned strategy, and both the McLaren drivers have mentioned strategy, pit stop strategy, and getting those pit stops right. And I'll tell you what, Red Bull may be struggling with the car this weekend, but their pit stops have just been spot on, the actual physical pit stops, and so have their strategy. They've been spot on with their strategy, but so is McLaren. Their strategy and pit stops have both been right around that 2-second mark. So both of those teams have been great about that, but that's where we could see a potential error there too, right, Jonathan?
Esteban Ocon just under the fringes of the top 10. It's set up.
Hey, Greeny? Did I lose you? I think I lost Johnny.
I've lost you.
I don't know what's going on with that one, Jonathan, but let's check out with Chris because I did hear your mic, Chris.
I'm with you.
Oh, you're back, Jonathan. Go ahead. I was just saying about the pit stops, about how both Red Bull and McLaren have been fantastic at strategy and the physical acts of having those 2-second pit stops this year.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, messing up a pit stop at Monaco is, we saw it with Ricciardo a couple of years ago. Hero to zero, he's won this race. But it really is a case of getting it right and hitting your marks at Monaco. There is, just like the track, the pit stops have to be absolutely precise.
Yeah. Chris, I think your mic.
Hopefully, I'm back with you guys. And you can hear me now.
We got you.
Have you finally got me back? Sorry about that. I had to run through into the pit lane to get signal back and get my phone rebooted. But as you're talking about the pit stops, I'm in the pit lane right now between Alpine and Williams, standing between the 2 pit bays. It is so tight. I mean, incredibly tight. The gap between where Alpine want to stop the front nose of their car and then to the back of where they want the Williams to stop is about 2 car lengths. That's it.
Wow.
It's, these guys are coming in still at 60 miles an hour, essentially, and they've got to hit it to the millimeter to make sure it's a quick stop. So they're all angled. So actually, they're not in a straight line. the pit boxes are all kind of marked out with stickers, and they're pointing towards the garages because it's easier for the driver to get in at that angle, and then from a standing start, they can get more steering lock on and spin the rears and get out that angle further, if that makes sense. So that's why they don't actually come in straight; they come in at a bit of an angle. But it is, the most treacherous of the season in that sense.
Yeah, and that goes back to the size of the cars we were talking about earlier. And I mean, Jonathan, how big what's the size difference between the cars that pit lane garage area was built for? I mean, it's huge.
Yeah, I know. Well, Formula One cars have got longer in the past, because remember a few years ago they were much shorter and narrower. But it's pretty. There's no real estate. There's nowhere to build.
Yeah, and like I say,
keep going up, don't they? If I look above the garages, they're now 3 stories high with a roof terrace. At the pit entry, it's now a 5-story building. That they just keep going higher and higher with these temporary buildings as they get a bit better technology. But there's nowhere to go out. And I'm with you guys. Smaller cars would make it better, but even as it is, I implore people, if you get a chance to come to this race and just see it, you'll at least know why it's on the calendar. Even if the race, it could be great, but it could be fairly professional.
You know what, Chris? You're absolutely right. To go there, you would seal that deal in your mind. Go, this is why this is still here. But you can really get a good bit of that on television, because just watching this weekend and just leading up to it, just seeing the photographs come through and looking at the not just the boats in the harbor and everything, but the cars on this city track. I mean, it's just an amazing scene, and it's hard to paint that on the radio, but the history and everything else, there's just really something amazing and special about Monaco. And particularly on this day when you have Monaco and then the Indy 500 and then NASCAR, Coca-Cola, it's just a fantastic day. And this is the perfect way to kick it off, get up early and watch Monaco and set your day off. It's really an amazing experience. And Chris, I know that being there makes all the difference in the world, but I think that you got to be happy to be able to try to paint this picture for people.
Oh, absolutely. I'm actually so jealous that everyone else gets to then watch those 2 races afterwards, when I'll be running around getting reaction after this race and then doing writing, because I'd love just to grab a cold one and sit down in front of the TV and watch those 2 races. But yeah, as it stands, I'm about to walk out of the pit lane at the entry end. So I'm walking in the wrong direction down the pit lane. And in front of me is this huge rock that is lined with fans. They're just perched on this rock, and they've been there for hours overlooking the final sector. And then above that is the palace and the old town that's overlooking the circuit as well, where all the balconies are full. People are right on the edge of every bit of wall that they can get a vantage point from. And then if you look down to my left, you've got Raskas, and you can see the bar, which is Raskas Bar and Restaurant, which is the name of the corner. But then on the outside of it, I've just watched the safety car creep backwards slowly and reverse into that slot. So that's where it hides while the grid come round to the grid ahead of the start. And then the safety car will head either straight to the pit lane or pull out ready to pick everyone up at the end of the first lap if needed.
John, just another scene set. Just looking down, on Monaco, you were talking about watching the 500. Stars and Bars is the bar that everybody goes to afterwards, and you can bump into Jack. I've sat there with Jack Villeneuve or Martin Brundle. Everybody's in that bar having lunch and having a glass of wine and watching the 500, and it's quite surreal to be in that presence, watching in a sports bar, effectively watching with all these luminaries. You can probably do all sorts.
Yeah, I remember Les did that one year.
To you, Johnny, but it's gone.
It's gone?
It is no more. So
it is no more.
It is no more. It's now a healthy eating establishment that doesn't have TVs, and there'll be no one in there watching the 500, sadly.
All right, guys, we're down.
I'll be heading to McLaren.
We're down to the prediction time. We got about 30 seconds. Chris, who you got?
Leclerc, Piastri, Norris.
Damn it again! Leclerc, Piastri, Norris. That's my bet.
Well, I got to go Leclerc. I'll say Norris, Piastri. How about that? Spin it up a little bit.
All right.
Good work.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. You got the race coming here from the BBC right now for the next 2 hours, and then immediately after the race, our post-race show. And if you want to join, you can always give us a call. So write the number down, 512-643-5483. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you after the race.